Hey, what's happening, guys? This is Rob of Rule2R Review. Welcome back to the channel. And today I wanted to revisit the idea of a Nintendo Switch Pro. So this is a topic I have discussed before because, as many of us know, many months back, there was a report, or really just a rumor that wasn't completely verified, that said Nintendo was looking at releasing some sort of upgraded version of the Nintendo Switch sometime in 2019, probably close to the middle of the year. And this is a huge conversation, this is a huge idea, there's a lot of implications behind it. One of the big things that I think we all know and kind of expect for 2019 is for it to probably be the year where we start to see or hear official confirmations from any of the big three companies about their next generation machines. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the PlayStation 5. In fact, even this week, there's been more discussion about the PlayStation 5, as apparently there's been some sort of leak about the actual chipset or some of the actual components going into the build of the PlayStation 5. And so that's a current conversation that's been going on, which is certainly exciting. A lot of you guys know me, I'm not really familiar with the techie side of stuff, so I can't really have a conversation about what kind of LMNOP chip is going into the PlayStation 5 versus an XYZ 517 chip or whatever any of that stuff means. That's not me, my brain doesn't function that way. I just get more into kind of the business side and then the promise of new power and new games and new franchises and stuff like that. That's where I like to talk about the next generation. And then, of course, we can't forget that Phil Spencer was talking about the, quote, Xbox Scarlet at E3 last year in 2018, so Sony and Microsoft have put a little bit of movement into play as far as their next generation machines, and so 2019 very likely could be the year that we see or hear Sony say, yes, we are making a PlayStation 5, and this is what it's going to be. And then Microsoft might do the same thing. Yes, we are making a new Xbox, and it's, you know, it was the Scarlet, and now it's called this, and so here it is, and, you know, these machines might be coming out in 2020, but maybe they would reveal or confirm them this year. Which, of course, brings us back to Nintendo and the idea of possibly some form of Nintendo Switch Pro or a new Nintendo Switch, basically some kind of upgraded or changed version of the current Switch the way we know it. And as I was saying, a couple of months ago, that's where this story came out, that maybe Nintendo was looking to release something in 2019. Now, when I discussed this many months ago, when this story first had broke, I kind of was on the fence about the idea. Like, I wanted to believe that, yeah, there's got to be some motion to this because stories like this the past few years have usually turned out to have some truth to them. But at the end of the day, I also wasn't 100% ready to say that, yeah, Nintendo has to be doing this. It makes nothing but business sense. It's got to be something that they would be doing because they'd be stupid not to. It was very strange. And now here we are in January 2019. It's been, whatever, 4, 5, 6 months since that story broke, and we're all feeling the pull of the next generation, expecting PS5 and Xbox stuff, like I said. And I'm kind of getting to the point where, honestly, if I'm being real with you guys, I am starting to believe more in the idea of a Nintendo Switch Pro. And if I'm being also honest with you guys, I mean, it's really just kind of a gut feeling more than anything. This isn't based on rumors or leaks or stories or behind-the-scenes info that I've heard on this exact topic. Granted, there are some people who I've tended to trust in the past who are very much doubling down and saying, yeah, I think that this is going to happen. I have my own inside sources that says Nintendo's releasing something soon. And so that does certainly help, but my overall opinion shift into more believing this just really comes from just kind of feeling out the industry and feeling out Nintendo based on everything going on right now. It should also be noted that there's another element to this, which is something I even recently discussed myself as well, which is the idea of this upgraded or new version of the Switch being something that would be handheld only. A Nintendo Switch that doesn't operate on a dock, that can't be hooked up or connected to a TV, where the Joy-Cons wouldn't separate. It would basically become like the brand new Game Boy, only it's essentially a Nintendo Switch that would play Nintendo Switch games. That's an interesting concept. Michael Pachter recently talked about it when analyzing Nintendo for 2019, and a couple of other people have talked about it, analysts and stuff as well, and some other YouTubers. And it's an interesting idea. Here's the thing. The idea of a handheld-only Switch is something I would only want to see more out of a curiosity. And there definitely is reason to believe that Nintendo probably could and should make a dedicated handheld-only device to fill in that market. But I'm starting to feel like that's maybe what they want the mobile market to be going forward, and they still want to stick to the traditional dedicated gaming devices like a Nintendo Switch or a 3DS or whatever else they might make in the future. I think that's maybe how they're kind of splitting their business models up. And so, kind of like what I recently said, the idea of a handheld-only Switch, it is an interesting idea, and nothing is impossible, absolutely, but I still don't necessarily believe that that's something Nintendo wants to do. I am starting to believe in the Switch Pro, like this whole video was kind of built on, but the handheld-only idea of a Switch is something that I don't think that they're considering right now. And I mean, hey, like I said, I almost want to see it just to see what it's like and to see how the market reacts to it, because I do think that there could be a market for something that's handheld only, but I don't think that it's necessarily the Nintendo Switch. So I'm looking at the Nintendo Switch Pro or new Nintendo Switch concept as something different than a handheld only Switch. And I think that one of the main reasons I'm starting to believe in the idea of a Switch Pro is now that we're in the year of 2019, which is the year a lot of us feel that we are going to see a PlayStation 5 and a next Xbox, more than ever, and I have said this in the past as well, but now I'm really feeling more than ever that Nintendo simply cannot not have an answer to Sony or Microsoft. And like I said, I've said that exact concept a few times before to you guys, but it just feels right in 2019 to consider this. Nintendo can't keep going with their current business model with the Switch just the way it is and not have anything to answer for Sony or Microsoft bringing new hardware and getting people excited about a PlayStation 5 or a next Xbox. I mean, the PlayStation 4, you guys, is such a powerful name. It is such a powerful console, not in terms of the power of the machine, but in terms of the power of the name PlayStation 4 and people's understanding and recognition of it and the quality of the console. People know it's very good. It's like the current, you know, gold standard for home consoles and stuff right now. So I think that because of that, once a PlayStation 5 would be announced, it would be so dominant in the news cycle, and people would be so excited. Consumers, news stations, news outlets, sites like IGN and GameSpot, YouTubers like myself, and so many others. There would be so much talk and hype about it that Nintendo can't turn a blind eye to it. And especially if Microsoft follows suit, or even if it's vice versa, where Microsoft dumps info first and Sony follows suit. I mean, imagine this news cycle where Sony and Microsoft are just dominating, getting so much positive press and headlines about their new machines. The next generation is coming. Here comes the Xbox 1020. Here comes the PlayStation 5. It's gonna be incredible. Oh my gosh, we've never seen anything like this. And then Nintendo, granted, the Switch is so incredible, great machine, obviously, my favorite on the market, and we are just now getting reports about how incredibly well it is still selling, and it is outpacing the PS4 and Xbox One, and that's great. But if Nintendo is sitting in the corner with that same device and nothing else to share, and everyone already knows the Switch is cool because it's portable, but it doesn't match the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and there are still some games coming to the PlayStation and Xbox that aren't coming to the Switch, Sony and Microsoft come out, dominate those headlines, and Nintendo has nothing to show for it, nothing to say, nothing to try to combat that limelight and get themselves in the same news cycle of look at how great Nintendo is. They're also bringing some kind of new hardware, so be excited for Nintendo and the Switch as well. I think that that's something that they would see as a negative, and it would definitely have them potentially losing some ground to Sony and Microsoft. And I know that that kind of gets us into a different territory of conversation about how much Nintendo truly competes with Sony and Microsoft, and that's a tired conversation that we've all had many times, and I've discussed it. Reggie even had quotes last year about it as well. And I mean, to me, I don't really want to go off too much into that tangent, but I think that we can acknowledge, yes, Nintendo does their own thing, but at the same time, they are also competition to Sony and Microsoft. All three pay attention to each other. You're never going to convince me that Nintendo isn't paying attention to Sony and Microsoft and is just completely not caring about those guys. Yes, they can try to carve out their own niche market, and that's what makes Nintendo great and keeps them successful. But they can't also pretend like they're not playing in the same sandbox, because they are. And that applies to Sony and Microsoft. They can't pretend they're not in the same sandbox as Nintendo and the Switch as well. And so that's why I think Nintendo will care and should be caring about the PlayStation 5 and next Xbox if we hear about those soon. And so now bringing it all the way back specifically to the idea of the Switch Pro, that's where I think it fits into this conversation, is because I'm starting to believe more than ever that could be something Nintendo would want to combat all of that news and attention that Sony or Microsoft would have with the announcement of their new machines in 2019. I think that Nintendo realizes we need to do something to keep the Switch name strong, to keep the brand, you know, at the forefront of our company and in the minds of most gamers and consumers out there. It's been a non-stop runaway success for the first 2 years, but 2019 could be something where Sony and Microsoft steal that limelight back. And if they could release a device that is exciting to people and gets their name out in the press again, that could be a way for them to do that. Not to mention, they're probably thinking, also, once a PlayStation 5 and Xbox One come along, man, we're going to be even more outclassed in terms of what's capable on these devices, which is going to further separate the kinds of third-party content the Switch would see if we're dealing with, you know, the current 2017 Switch with its power, and then a PS5 and an Xbox One. I mean, Nintendo's going to know they need to do something to make sort of a power jump to keep more on pace with those new machines. And, you know, I mean, in some ways it feels kind of weird for me to talk about the power game because I've never really been someone that cares about it too much. I think the main reason I find it interesting and relevant to this conversation, the idea of Nintendo trying to keep pace with the power of Sony and Microsoft, is simply because they kind of need to. It's less about my desire, like, oh, I need the best graphics and the best power, and that's the only thing I like because graphics make the games good. Like, that's not how I roll. You guys know that that's not how I feel. I love good graphics and powerful machines, but it's not what defines a quality console to me. But I do think that this is just something that Nintendo needs to pay attention to because the market certainly cares about it. And the news cycle and the press and the excitement and the hype of the average consumer and the average gamer does care about it. So if Nintendo sees that gap in capability and power, you know, made even bigger between the current Switch and then next generation hardware from Microsoft and Sony, it's just going to be a little bit damaging, I think, to the potential of their sales and their perception within the industry and as a competitive device and company to Sony and Microsoft. Like, it's important for them to care about it. And that further leads me to believe that, yeah, they might be planning some sort of new hardware refresh or hardware upgrade in 2019. The big question for me is, do I personally want it or do I personally care? And, you know, like I was just saying, no, I really don't. I mean, I don't need an upgraded Nintendo Switch. But I will say this. If they did reveal and release some kind of upgraded Switch and it wasn't a complete ripoff for me to want to invest into it, the reason I would be willing to do it is if it truly did show that this is going to make other games possible on the Switch. And that, you know, this brings us back to the original conversation from months ago about, you know, the rumor that the Switch Pro would be something that plays certain games, whereas the original Switch that we all have now wouldn't be able to play some of those games. And in my opinion, that hurts the idea of a Switch Pro being real, because I do think that Nintendo would struggle to want to release a machine, a device that would segregate and separate their audience and alienate some gamers that maybe bought the $300 Switch but can't afford to upgrade to the $400 Switch Pro. Like, and if that's what they would have to do to be able to play games like Resident Evil 2 or whatever other big games, you know, Grand Theft Auto 6, Red Dead Redemption 2, if they would have to do that to play those games on their Switch, I think that that would, in a lot of ways, be an anti-consumer and an anti-gamer move, and Nintendo doesn't like to do those things. Yeah, I know, we can joke about Nintendo Switch Online, but, you know, aside from the online service, Nintendo doesn't like to traditionally do those things, and so I feel like that's something that makes them not want to do the Switch Pro. But in a world where they decided to, and it made the difference between playing some games or not playing some games, that's where I would start to be interested in it, because I would love to play some of these great big third-party multi-platform games portably on my Nintendo device. I mean, that just gets me excited, I can't lie. So, I don't know, man. This really just comes back to the same old thing that I say to you guys all the time. Nintendo is impossible to predict, man. You never know what they're going to do, and it is exciting. It does keep us on our toes, and it is, in my opinion, one of the cooler elements to Nintendo compared to Sony and Microsoft. So when we look at the idea of a Switch Pro or an upgraded Switch or whatever Nintendo might be doing this year to combat any other new hardware, who knows, man? I mean, like I said, I'm starting to believe in it. I don't think Nintendo will remain completely silent if Sony and Microsoft have new consoles to confirm or to reveal to us this year in 2019. But it's so tricky because a Switch Pro definitely impacts the idea of moving on from the Switch. I mean, in the next couple of years, we'd have to think that Nintendo's going to basically make the successor, and the Switch is going to become their previous machine. And when is that going to happen? Would they do that the year after they reveal a Switch Pro? I mean, it's just kind of a big mess, and we're just going to have to wait and see like always. So at the end of the day, these are my thoughts and feelings, and I want to hear what you guys have to say, man. Are you somebody who believes in the idea of a Switch Pro? Do you not believe in the idea? Have you always believed in it, or have you been changing your mind? I mean, again, this story first broke months and months ago, and we don't even yet know if Sony and Microsoft are going to show us anything this year or not anyway. So all of this could be moot if nothing happens in 2019. But I think most of us expect, at the very least, a PlayStation 5 in 2019. That seems like it's destined to happen. So what do you guys think? Talk about it below. Share your opinions as always. That is it for me. Thanks so much as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.